Alright, hi, good day again, everyone. So today we will be doing January 2025, number 4. Right? A line segment joins point C and point D. C is minus 5, 4, D is 7, 2. Calculate the midpoint. Now we have to know that the midpoint is equals to x2 plus x1 over 2 and y2 plus y1 over 2. That's the formula. Alright, so this would be, you have to choose one to be x1, which one to be group 1, point 1 and point 2. x1, y1, x2, y2. Right, so I have 7, which is x2 plus negative 5 over 2, and then 2 plus 6 over 2. Which would be 7 minus, a plus and a minus is a minus. So I have 7 minus 5 is 2 over 2. And 6 plus 2 is 8. 8 over 2. Right? So 1, 4. Right? So my midpoint is 1, 4. And that is 2 marks. Simply to remember your formula and how to apply it in the formula. And it's a simple 2 marks. Find the gradient of your line segment. Again, you just need to know your formula and you should be good. Right, I'm just putting this here so I don't have to scroll up. So gradient of a line, gradient is equals to y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, which is 2 minus 6 over 7 minus 5. So my gradient would be 2 minus 6 is negative 4. 7 minus 5 is 7 plus 5. 7 plus 5 is 12. Right? So what's going to 4 and 12? 4. So you divide this by 4. Divide this by 4. So reduce it to negative 1 over 3. So negative a third would be our gradient for line segment CD. Alright, let's read the part C. Part C says, determine the equation of the perpendicular bisector. Now, what you need to understand with perpendicular bisector is that our perpendicular bisector is 2 lines that intersect at 90 degrees. So therefore, gradient of CD multiplied by the gradient of the perpendicular line to CD would give you negative 1. So negative a third multiplied by this gradient that we're trying to find the equation of, right? I'll put x just to make it easier, is equals to negative 1. So x would be, I carry across negative a third, which turns to multiply by a third. So that's negative 1. Not multiply, I'll turn to divide. Divided by negative 1 over 3, which is negative 1 multiplied by 3 over negative 1, which would be a negative, and a negative is a positive, so it's positive 3. So the gradient of my perpendicular bisector is 3. Also, you need to know when they say perpendicular bisector, let's say this is CD. It's intersecting at 90 degrees, which tells us a gradient, and also that bisector means it cut this line at a half. Right? What do we know? The line at a half is our midpoint. So to find the perpendicular or the gradient, not the gradient, to find a line at your perpendicular bisector would be our midpoint. Right, so it would be intersecting line CD at the midpoint, which is 1, 4. So it intersects at 1, hold on, x is 1 and y is 4. So we would be using gradient is equals to 3 and 1, 4 to find the equation of our perpendicular bisector. You put it in the form y is equals to mx plus c, or we have a formula, another formula for it. This is x, this is y, so that is 4 is equals to 3 by 1 plus c. If I make c the subject, that is 4 minus 3 is equals to c, so c is equals to 1. So now that I know my y-intercept, right, I know my gradient, I can find the equation, which is y is equals to m, which is 3x plus my perpendicular, plus my y-intercept, which is c, plus 1. And that is how you would determine the equation of the perpendicular bisector of CD. So let's look at D. Another line AB is parallel to CD. As soon as you see that they tell you that the lines are parallel to each other, the properties of parallel lines are their gradients are equal. So the gradient of CD was negative a third. So the gradient, let me just put the gradient, M, which means gradient of CD, and the gradient of AB would also be the same. So the gradient of AB is negative a third and passes through the point 0, 1. So write down the equation of the line AB. So we are going to use your gradient, which is negative a third, and the point passing through, you're going to use 0, 1. Now immediately, guys, x is 0, y is 1, right? In your mind, you're supposed to think, well, when x is 0, that is on your y-axis. What do we know when x is 0 and y is equals to a value? That is your c. So c is actually 1. So instead of going through the way that we did it above, or the previous question, looking at this point, they already told you that it's intersecting your y-axis at 1. Well, the line for AB is intersecting your y-axis at 1. Again, C is your y-intercept, right? So we know that y would be negative a third x plus 1. And that should be your answer. Now, if you don't remember it, right, you can just do y is equals to mx plus c. So we know y is 1 is equals to negative a third by x, which is 0, plus c. So we can see c is equals to 1. So now we know y is equals to negative a third x plus 1. So we can put it in the equation to see it, or you could have the understanding and do less working for whenever x is 0 and they give you a y value, that is your y-intercept. And that is how you would do, that is the end of January 2025 number 4.